Hey guys, it's Kevin Ward again here with the MixCoach. This is episode 103 of the MixCoach podcast, and today we are talking again on a question and answer session that John and I had with members over at MixCoach Member. I'm going to give you some tips on when to start setting balance for strings and orchestra. So if that sounds like something you'd like to hear about, stay tuned. Hey, let's take one more question, and then I'm gonna see if we can sneak in there on the session. Okay, so Grover says, in this mix, at what point did you begin setting your balances with the tall, short, etc. rooms, each change potentially influencing the color of the percussion and drum kit? At what point do you solidify your balance? Apologies. Says he hasn't seen the walkthrough. Okay, Grover, in my opinion, and I know this is probably not what you want to hear, but the tall mics and the short mics, sometimes I'll use those in lieu of the direct mics. But since we had all this big orchestra stuff, a lot of the padded stuff, I didn't really use the rooms because I felt like I was kind of treating the pads as the room, as a big room sound that had a lot of definition to it. I don't feel like it interferes with the percussion and things like that, because the percussion is not in those room mics. It's a very clean, there's a brass room. We're only got strings on this song, but there's only strings in there. So there's no percussion in there if you're talking about orchestral percussion. But as far as drums and stuff, I don't feel like it ever competes with it. And if it does, it's such a fast fix for me that it's like, oh, that's not working. I'll pull it down a little bit or mute that. I work at such a pace like that I really don't recognize whether it's affecting the. Yeah. And a lot of times when you mix in mono, you tend to make decisions that make things cleaner anyway, and take things out of competition with stuff. So. I started doing it from the very beginning.
Yeah, I was about to say it kind of is a throughout process where so in the mix, like whenever you bring up something, if you don't like it immediately, I usually trust that feeling and I go, nah, I'm not going to do this. Another thing to think about, like, so something whenever I was in college, I was a theory comp major, composition major for a really long time, and so one of the best pieces of advice for orchestrating things or making things with multiple sections and multiple ensembles was to make each section feel right within itself, and then whenever you add it together, it'll sound good, and you may have to make some changes and things like that, but it'll overall feel pretty good. And so translating that to mixing, if you get those rooms balanced really well within themselves, like Kev was saying, the percussion and the drum tracks are not in those. And so if you get them feeling like those tall rooms and the short rooms and things like that, if you get that balance feeling really good within that section, you may have to change some small EQ things a little bit whenever you insert everything else and bring them into the rest of the song. But overall, you're going to be starting from a really good place, and you're probably not going to need to adjust the balance leveling that much. You can maybe say, oh, well, it seems like the bass or something like that is being affected by the low bass of the strings. And so you may need to adjust the balance of those two elements a little bit. But overall, I think if you get this section feeling right with those short rooms, tall rooms, that sort of thing, and then bring it in, it'll feel pretty close whenever you bring it back into everything else. It won't change the color of the rest of the mix nearly as much as you think it might. And you may have to change some things here and there, like I said, small tweaks. But if you get each section kind of feeling right within themselves, it will help a lot it'll go a long way to feeling better as a unit.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'll do. I really don't depend on the room of the strings in the mix. Like John said, whenever I'm mixing either big band or jazz or anything like that, I mean, I put things in buckets. I'll put the strings in a string bucket, and I'll make the strings sound like I want them to, knowing that I can go and adjust the room mics or the verb or the EQ or the bus or any individual fader, but that's in a bucket. That's the auxiliary fader that we talked about in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave that alone. And most of the time, it just stays there. So
Yeah.
I never make calls on whether the orchestra room or the string room affects the percussion or the drums or whatever, because it just never comes up, because either the strings sound good or they don't. And then
Right.
later on, I'll listen to the strings again and say, yeah, there's too much room in there, and then I'll pull it down. But it's never because I think that it's competing with something else. At least not. At
Not
least
consciously.
it never. Not a conscious thing anyway.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps, Grover.
Yeah. The MixCoach podcast takes both submitted questions from our free members and live questions from our pro members. And if you would like to submit a question or find out how to become a pro member, head over to mixcoach.com/free.